If you've ever checked your Social Security statement, you've probably had some questions pop up like, are these numbers for real? Is this guaranteed? And what if inflation gets worse? How's all that accounted for? And what happens if I keep working or if I stop working early? It's smart to think about those things. So let's talk about what actually makes your numbers change and hopefully for the better. Hopefully they go up. Whenever you get an estimate or a statement, they are just that. They are estimates. And the Social Security Administration warns you of that, saying this is what we think you'll get, but there's no guarantee. It's possible that you'll get less, but hopefully you'll get more. And in fact, I think a lot of people will get more than the actual number that shows. So let's talk about what can make the numbers go up, including inflation adjustments and additional earnings and possibly other things. Let's start with inflation. So the numbers you see on your statement are in today's dollars. What we're looking at here is just a sample statement from the Social Security Administration. And you see that chart that is very familiar. It's the monthly income at various ages. And you can see, of course, that the later you claim, the more you would get for each month. Now, you know that inflation exists. So won't you just lose purchasing power between now and whenever you start taking benefits? And the answer is that Social Security is adjusted for inflation. So hopefully you should have roughly the same amount of purchasing power once you start that benefit that it would give you today. In other words, if it says you'll get $2,900 a month and that's way out in the future, then you'll probably get more than $2,900 actual dollars per month, but that should provide the purchasing power that $2,900 gives you today. But that depends on some assumptions. In particular, we're assuming that inflation in your life will match the inflation that is applied to your payment, and that may or may not be true. The good news here is that some research shows that retirees often spend at about inflation minus 1%. So hopefully you would at least be able to keep on spending at a rate that would be expected or what you want. I've got other videos on that topic, so keep an eye out for those. Once you reach age 62 or while you're taking payments from Social Security, your payment will get adjusted each year with inflation. And you can take a look at the Social Security Administration's website and see the history of these inflation adjustments. Some of them are bigger than others. As you can see, they use the CPIW, and you can quibble with that choice, but that's how they do it. So it's reasonable to assume you'll get a raise almost every year, at least if there is some inflation. Hopefully, we don't have deflation. Again, that might not match your own personal inflation, but there is some accounting for inflation here. And here's how this looks in financial planning tools. So this is often what I do with clients. For example, here you see the benefit increasing each year, and that's because it's getting adjusted for inflation. And we can set an assumption for the inflation rate on your Social Security benefits, and that can be different from the inflation rate we use on your general spending or different from even the rate that applies to your healthcare spending. So it's possible to customize these types of things, and it's probably conservative, probably wise to apply a slightly lower rate to Social Security inflation. That way it doesn't go up quite as fast as your expenses go up. And you can also do this in DIY tools like Bolden. So here's an example of something a client sent me with the assumptions she used. You know, some people use different numbers. It's up to you exactly what you enter there for optimistic or pessimistic or whatever. But the idea being here that you can say that Social Security will inflate at a different rate than general inflation, or for example, how much we appreciate your house each year. If you're younger than 60, there are also some adjustments that happen to your benefits. You can go back and look at all your old statements, and you should see that the number keeps on increasing for a given age, even if you're no longer working and paying into the Social Security system. That happens as a result of wage indexing. And without getting too into the weeds here, here's a quick overview of how it works. Instead of looking at CPIW inflation like they do after 62, they look at the average wage index. And or they make some assumptions about what that increase might look like if you're not yet age 60. Ultimately, they run a calculation that figures out a more current value of what all your old earnings would be worth today or when you turn 60. So you earned money when you were 22. Now, what's the equivalent of those earnings when you're 60? Then the highest 35 results go into your average indexed monthly earnings or your AMI. And then that number goes through bend points, which are not really important for now, to arrive at your primary insurance amount or your PIA. That PIA is what you see as the monthly payment you would get if you start your Social Security retirement income at your full retirement age. Essentially, the more wage inflation there was before you reach age 60, then the more your benefit should increase. The key takeaway here is that yes, there is some accounting for inflation when it comes to your Social Security retirement income. So that was inflation. What else could potentially impact your benefit? Well, if you continue working, that could also cause your monthly payments to go up. And remember that Social Security looks at your highest 35 years of indexed earnings. If you have fewer than 35 years in your earnings history, then you're going to have zeros in those spots. Or maybe you have some years of relatively low earnings. And so it's not a zero, but it's a pretty low number. By working another year, you could potentially bump out one of those zeros and replace it with a higher number, maybe just bump out one of the very low numbers with a higher number because you're, let's say, in your 50s or 60s, those might be your peak earnings years. It's always nice to get rid of one of those zeros, but the impact might not be as big as you think. You just have to take a look. The opposite can also be true. In fact, people often ask, what if I retire early? Or what if I get laid off and I can't find another job that pays quite as much as I have been earning? Well, that could affect your benefit. What happens is that Social Security assumes that you will continue earning the same amount until you start taking your retirement income benefit. And that might not be true. So if you have some years of zero income or less income, it could mean that the monthly payment you're going to get is smaller than what they're showing on your estimates and your statements. Ultimately, you never know what the difference is going to be until you check. And I've got a video on how exactly to do that. So look for that video. With some clients, I've seen that it's really not much difference at all if they stop working a couple years early. But I have seen cases where a client just had a certain type of background where if they do retire early, it might be a very big difference, more than hundreds of dollars per month if they retire early. Now, remember that the only income that affects your Social Security benefit is income that you pay Social Security taxes on. So this doesn't apply to, let's say, interest or dividends that you get in your taxable accounts, doesn't apply to capital gains from selling a property. It's when you are working and paying payroll taxes or self-employment taxes on that income into the Social Security system, then those earnings are reported and they can affect your benefit. There are some other things that could cause your benefit to change, but these are the biggies for most people. And it's probably obvious, but the amount you get depends on when you claim. So you can start taking benefits in any month between age 62 and 70. And the longer you wait, the more you get. Using your full retirement age as a milestone, that's age 67 for most people approaching retirement. These days, if you claim before then you would have a reduction in benefits. And if you delay claiming until after your full retirement age, you get an increase that amounts to 8% of your full retirement age benefit for each full year that you delay. Although you don't have to wait a full year, it adds up every month, little by little. You could also find errors in your Social Security statement. Maybe there are some years where they missed your earnings. Once those get added in, that could bump up your payment. Or on the other hand, the benefits could be cut if Social Security's finances continue to be problematic. Maybe there will be reductions across the board. Who knows? Other changes are certainly possible, including changes in your family situation. So maybe you would become eligible for a survivor benefit, or maybe a spousal benefit becomes available, gets unlocked, and you might start getting more that way. Check out my other videos for more on those topics. And in addition to knowing how the numbers change, it's important to know philosophically where Social Security fits into your plan. So check out this video popping up now that goes over different mindsets, how people think about Social Security, and see if any of those resonate with you. I hope you found that helpful. If you did, please leave a quick thumbs up, and I look forward to talking with you soon.